Lots of issues arising in the last day. One of the big ones is transit passengers. It was expected, as countries in the Middle East were closing down, that transit passengers would be exempt from any of the regulations about inbound, about visas and about countries that are not allowed to enter. That changed very radically when Istanbul was closed to Irish passengers last night. It means that returning Turkish Airlines passengers have effectively been given their refund and told to make their own way home. Travel agents desperately trying to book clients on other lines from places like South Africa, which are well served by Turkish. These flights are inordinately expensive when you try to get a client home, and Turkish themselves are facing an existential crisis. There will be a big address on Sunday about the future, about jobs and about fleet. Another major issue is also related to price creep and inflation. The last of the returning flights to Spain are inordinately expensive. People, even with the waived change fee, are finding prices that would be higher than a transatlantic flight on some of these return flights. Transatlantic is still operating. That's a good thing. It means that the airports are open, apart from the 4 served from Ireland that are not designated by Donald Trump as incoming airports: Minneapolis, Hartford and Connecticut, Orlando and Philadelphia. But it also means that passengers are still booked on flights to a country which will deny them entry and are not able to get a refund. The refund issue burns on. Airlines are clearly going to buy time. We've seen American Airlines saying you can have your refund, but you must wait till 12 months and you have a credit in that period before you can collect your money. In Europe, legislation is a little bit different. The airlines have gone to Brussels and asked to use vouchers instead of refund. That has been turned down. It might be contested. It might end up in European courts. It might spend years working its way through the courts. Aer Lingus, for example, gave a 10% incentive yesterday. And that means that if you take your voucher, you get 110% of your fare. You also have 5 years. That's a long, long time in which to redeem your voucher. That should give the people who take vouchers an advantage. But when they look at the prices that they're rebooking, in some cases these routes were filled, 70, 60% of the flight filled, and that means that you're left with the most expensive tail-end seats. But people given a voucher and the option of a refund, obviously, are finding that rebooking is considerably more expensive than they would have expected. From a regulatory point of view, Department of Transport and the Commission of Aviation Regulation have been alerted by travel agents that their exposure under the Package Holiday Directive could be ruinous. It means that, for instance, if somebody goes to a country where the attractions are closed, they're entitled to a full refund. There are also questions of 3 nights accommodation, all of those sort of things, all of which the travel agent could have to pick the tab up for under existing legislation. It's time for a rethink on the Package Holiday Directive, seeing as European rules are being disobeyed and actually torn up in other areas. Travel agents under serious pressure. Pat Dawson of the Irish Travel Agents Association predicts 30 to 50 travel agents could cease trading as a result of the current crisis, and about 60% of staff are on short time. Where does travel rank in the list of problems being faced by the economy at the moment? 3,500 employees, it's not a lot, but it is a central link to the rest of the world, and that has to be emphasised and re-emphasised in the days to come. Repatriation is going apace from Spain. March the 21st is when all the trying to check people out and check them back in again problems will disappear with Ryanair. Ryanair is still thinking of grounding their fleet. It looks like it will be Sunday rather than Tuesday when you put the point of compensation to them. They say that is way down the line. That's something for governments, it's for the EU, it's for EU 261. They're so busy. The difficulties they face cancelling routes all over Europe, because Ireland is only part of their market, are enormous, and they're working their way through it. Aer Lingus resent the accusations of price gouging on the return flights from Spain. They said their duty was to the existing bookings, and anyone coming in for a new booking will have to treat it as if they're lucky to get a flight in the first place. These seats are at a premium. They were blocked off seats for transfers. All of that should be completed by Sunday. If it is imaginable, the cruise industry is facing a deeper crisis than the rest of the industry. Daily reports of cruise ships either being quarantined or refused entry to ports. Most of them have suspended services at this stage. Princess Cruises, as you might expect, have the longest suspension until May the 10th. Royal Caribbean until April the 10th, Norwegian until April the 11th, Holland America until April the 14th, and MSC until April the 30th. MSC, of course, have the first cruise ship due into Dublin port, so that is significant from an inbound perspective as well. We do still have Celebrity Silhouette home porting in Dublin as it stands. Who should we look to for guidance on a recovery? Cruise lines might be offering the most realistic approach, May the 10th for Princess resumptions. That sounds as early as we can expect at this stage. The aviation industry counting around mid-April, but they're following the government guidelines. The EU guideline takes us to the week after Easter. Ireland's guideline takes us to the end of March. Everybody expects that to be extended at this stage. And what happens next makes it even more difficult. Travel has been disproportionately affected, and it will be disproportionately disadvantaged in planning for the recovery. If, as the government advisory groups say, this is a case of flattening the curve, as they call it, tracking the cases, reducing them, then facing a new outbreak, it could mean that we have a cyclical pattern of travel and aviation cancellations over the year ahead. The consumer legislation as it stands is breaking down. Individual European countries are tearing up EU law when it comes to issues like airline nationalisation. Time may be for people in Dublin and the regulatory environment, in the department and within the travel trade itself to start being a little bit less rigorous in their interpretation of the laws that apply to our industry. Our industry is facing a serious crisis. Now is the time to have a rethink about everything we do.